Okay, so I guess I'm going to tell a story today, and the story is why I'm not a Christian. And I'm going to tell in some way, I guess, the whole story here. I grew up in Catholic school. I had 12 years of Catholic school. If you can see here, I have a tattoo of a cross on my hand. I, when I was younger, when I was about 16, I even worked at a monastery for around a year as a cook, where I was considering the priesthood. I didn't have any creepy, weird experiences. In fact, I met many wonderful, wonderful people, including three Polish nuns who had taken vows of silence. And they cleaned the monastery, and in some of the evenings, there would be prayers said in 8 or 9 languages, and it was fascinating. It was really wonderful, and it was inspiring in a lot of ways. But as I moved through my high school and increasingly had questions, now even as a young person, I had questions and was somewhat skeptical. I remember being a young person asking about Noah's Ark and how did Noah get a polar bear? And they thought it was cute and funny question, but to me it was a serious question. And by the time I got to high school, and do your research, whatever, I was the only kid in my high school who refused to be confirmed. And so there was a kind of a big stink and it came to this ahead over this question of life after death and the issue of, is there life after death? Now, I said, I really don't think that there is. And many people there told me, well, we believe there is, and that's part of Christian doctrine, is that there is salvation, and that's the meaning of the Christ figure, is that people will be saved. And I said, I just don't buy that. I think that there's just the evidence seems to be that when you're dead, you go back to where you were before you were born, wherever that is. But it seems like death is a natural process that the living undergo, that death is actually part of life. It's not something separate. And then many people tried in the midnight hour to convert me by saying, well, just go through and accept the vows, and later in life you'll be glad you did because you will have been confirmed and blah, blah, blah. And I didn't. And then I got really angry, I think, in some way. I sort of saw people encouraging me to be a hypocrite. And the more that I started to think about that, I guess the kind of piety I realized in myself, that I was at least serious enough about the ideas to want to say that I didn't want to be a hypocrite and take a vow that I didn't believe in. And this question of vows and what does it mean to be true to one's word, or to be of integrity with what you say, whatever that means. Um, I think in time, the question that I've increasingly tried to raise is, could you, just for argument's sake, forgive the divine if there is no afterlife? Now, I'm not saying that there is no afterlife, and I want to address this here even more. Do I know that there's no afterlife? No, I don't know, but the evidence really seems to be that when you're dead, and that's the meaning of it. People need the courage to accept that. I think it doesn't take as much courage to accept it once we start to open to this notion of, what does it mean to be part of life eternal while you're alive? It changes from the quest of bad infinity toward a movement toward the taste of the eternal all around you, right here, right now. I think that Christianity, as I said before, for many, many people, is a kind of cult of death denial. It's many people who literally believe that all of this is a big dress rehearsal, and that the real reward, the treat, the spending time in the radiance of God and all of this kind of stuff is to come afterward. I can't buy that. And that's really where I had to part ways. But at no point in my coming to terms with mortality did it lead me into atheism. As I've said before, I don't find atheism an intelligible perspective. I find it to be lacking in address to basic questions that I have. I don't feel like I have answers. I feel like I have questions, and religious people at least seem willing to entertain the legitimacy of those questions. I see some atheists, at least here on YouTube or in general, who basically by fiat just deny the question. And I want to say something too on Aaron Ra and his claim about faith in this sort of stuff. No, and this is I think this was interesting here. This the question of faith in the afterlife and faith in God is there seem to be lots of people who have a kind of faith in the afterlife, even though the evidence, I mean, all the evidence seems to suggest that mortality is natural, it's a natural process, and consciousness emerges in biological chemical process, and when you're dead, you're dead. And yet people have faith in a kind of consciousness that transcends the body despite all the evidence. But if I say that I believe that this is a divine ground of being and we are right now participating in life eternal, that's not some faith counter to evidence. It's by the evidence that I'm drawing it, Aaron. I think you're imagining. Where do you think I'm getting the belief or the sense or the experience, this feeling of the world being, again, a kind of divine mystery of a cosmos, I don't know what all this stuff is, but in some way, the universe, the cosmos, without trying to anthropomorphize, it wanted to experience diversity, mystery, distance, desire, all these sorts of things. If and these are like mythologies, right? Again, I don't think there is a being there. There's not like a guy who needs to sit because his feet are tired and all this kind of stuff. But if you try to just imagine a principle, and the principle is all powerful, omniscient, and all these kind of things, it's like what would be the one thing that this principle couldn't really experience or know? Well, it would be mystery, it would be distance, it would be otherness. And so to sentence itself into the throes of finitude, to lose itself into the contingencies of becoming, and to forfeit its very divinity for the sake of the harvest that would be yielded afterward, it all seems to be a kind of mystery deep down. And I think that one doesn't have a kind of faith out of nowhere. It's not some sort of faith out of nowhere, counter to evidence. If anything, it's about the unity amidst all the diversity. It's about the kind of transcendence that language affords. And it's about questions like, why is there something rather than nothing? Where did all this stuff come from, and how did some of the stuff become aware of itself? Now, to simply say, oh, well, it was a fluke and it's biological process and selection that occurred through evolutionary development, that sounds like a lot of words that help still the mind and organize it in some way, but I don't know if it really answers the questions. It sort of says, we don't know. Now, I don't think that one needs to go to a dogmatic, there is a guy and there's going to be an afterlife and all that stuff. But I think we can start to get to imaginative principles where we start to say, what does look like the unifying order in the cosmos? Well, it seems to be life, death as a kind of unity. And it seems that this mystery that has been going on for millennia has a built-in transcendence. There's lots of forms and levels of transcendence. And the first transcendence begins with the sort of adventure of the organic out of the inorganic. By the time you get organic and you have that metabolic sheath that expires and transpires between its environment, radical transformations. It now reaches out in space, and as you move up the phylogenetic scale, you see more and more ranges of transcendence, of mobility, of capacities for inwardness, for range of concern, for articulacy and expression. But as you move from, again, lower mammals up to higher mammals and all the way up to humans, there seems to be, the evidence seems to be, in principle, a growing range of transcendent mediacies. And by that I mean scopes of concern in space and time, of articulacy of expression, of inwardness in depths, and of openness to otherness. Now, again, some of this gets tricky. I mean, dogs are a very interesting case. Dogs do seem to be open to intention displays and other things like that. But I think the more general point is that life, from my own perspective, uh, is a kind of divine manifestation of a mystery seeking to encounter itself by losing itself and haunting itself as another, whatever that means. If you want to know more about that, please read my books. Please help a library find them. You don't have to buy them, but help a library find my books. Open this discussion. Let's talk about it. I'd rather argue about the things that I've written than about these things. It's very hard to talk about it in these very quick videos. Uh, but I think that there is a kind of divine manifestation here that's going on in a mysterious process of unfolding. I don't think there's any secure plan in the end. I think I part ways greatly with Christianity there. I'm not sure that there is anything like a saving. I think if there is a saving, the saving is a kind of harmony and balance that we achieve as we learn to open in compassion and love to others. My good colleague Amardo Rodriguez, who's a communication professor at Syracuse University, he wants to find communication as the habits and practices by which we become vulnerable to the humanity of others. And again, if you expand that open, maybe we even expand it when we talk about the become vulnerable to the life that we all share in. Sort of like this Alfonso Lingus, where he says that there's one community, the community of the dying, and we're all dying together. We're all dying together, and death excludes no one. I think the more that people could see themselves as a community of the dying, and to recognize the common plight that we're in. As much as the conversations were painful there for a while, I think these discussions about population, and it's not to exercise population control, but to really help people think about these issues. It's going to have to be a transformation of consciousness. People are going to have to transform the way that they understand themselves in the world and their larger obligations. I don't think social policy and better public programming is going to make it happen. At any rate, so those are some thoughts. Thanks.